The storm came out of nowhere. One moment, the sky was gray. The next, the rain slammed against the city like it was angry at all of us. Power lines went down, streets flooded, and everything familiar suddenly felt fragile. I never imagined that by the end of that night, my boss would be standing at my apartment door, soaked, shaken, and about to change the way I understood kindness forever. What she said next still echoes in my mind. Her voice was quiet but firm as she looked at me and said, "Don't call me your boss tonight." In that moment, something shifted between us, and I knew this wasn't just a story about a storm. It was a story about humanity. Before we begin, if you enjoy real-life stories that remind you how powerful kindness can be, make sure to subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and share your thoughts in the comments. This is your channel name, and your support helps us keep bringing heartfelt stories like this to you. I live in a small apartment in a working-class neighborhood. Nothing fancy, just a one-bedroom place with old wooden floors, a couch I bought secondhand, and a tiny kitchen where the fridge hums louder than it should. I've always been proud of it because it's mine. I worked hard for every inch of that space. At the time, I was working at a mid-sized company downtown. My boss, Linda, was known for being strict, professional, and always in control. She wore tailored suits, spoke clearly in meetings, and never missed a deadline. To be honest, she intimidated me. I respected her, but I kept my distance. She was my boss, and I was just trying to keep my job. That evening, the storm hit while we were still at the office. The rain poured so hard, you could barely see the buildings across the street. The wind howled through the city, rattling windows and setting off car alarms. The office lights flickered, then went out completely. Most people rushed home as soon as they could, but public transportation shut down quickly. Roads were blocked, and ride-share prices skyrocketed. I lived close enough to walk, even in the rain. Linda lived much farther away, in a high-rise across the river. I was packing my bag when I saw her standing by the window, staring at the dark city below. For the first time, she looked uncertain. "I think my building lost power," she said, more to herself than to me, "and the bridges are closed." I hesitated. Everything in me said this wasn't my place. She was my boss. She had her own life, her own resources. But then I remembered what my mother always told me. Kindness is about seeing the person, not their title. So I cleared my throat and said, "I live nearby. It's not much, but you could stay at my place tonight, just until the storm passes." She turned and looked at me like she hadn't heard correctly. There was a long pause. I felt foolish, like I'd crossed some invisible line. Finally, she nodded. "Thank you," she said quietly. We walked through the rain together, sharing one small umbrella that barely helped. By the time we reached my apartment, both of us were drenched. I handed her a towel and apologized for the mess, for the small space, for everything. She smiled softly. "You don't need to apologize," she said. "This is more than enough." I made some tea while she changed into dry clothes I offered her. They were oversized and clearly not her style, but she wore them anyway. We sat on opposite ends of the couch at first, the storm roaring outside, the power flickering on and off. That's when she said it. "Tonight," she said, looking at me seriously, "don't call me your boss." I laughed nervously, thinking she was joking. "Okay, Linda." She smiled. "Tonight, I'm just a person who needed help, and you're someone who offered it." Something about that broke down a wall inside me. We started talking, not about work, not about deadlines or performance reviews. We talked about life. She told me she grew up in a small town in Ohio, raised by a single mother who worked 2 jobs. She talked about how she learned to be tough because she had to be, how showing vulnerability at work felt dangerous, like it could cost her respect. I told her about my struggles too, about student loans, about being afraid of not being good enough, about the pressure of trying to prove myself every single day. I admitted how intimidated I had been by her. She listened. Really listened. No interruptions, no judgment. At one point, the rain softened, and the apartment grew quiet. The power came back on, and the lights filled the room with a warm glow. Linda looked around my small living room and said, "You know, this is the first time in a long time I felt truly at ease." That surprised me. She had everything I thought I wanted. Success, money, authority. But here she was, finding peace on a worn-out couch in a tiny apartment. We shared a simple dinner of canned soup and toast. It wasn't impressive, but we laughed about it, and it felt like one of the most genuine meals I'd ever had. When it was time to sleep, I gave her my bed and took the couch. She protested, but I insisted. Before turning off the light, she stopped and said thank you. Not just for the place to stay, but for seeing me. The next morning, the storm had passed. The city looked washed clean, like it had been given a second chance. Over coffee, we talked about going back to work. The invisible line between boss and employee slowly reappeared, but it felt different now. Softer. When we walked into the office later that day, no one knew what had happened. We slipped back into our roles, but something had changed. Over the next few weeks, Linda became more approachable. She asked how people were really doing. She encouraged breaks, praised effort, and listened more. And I felt more confident, more valued. One afternoon, she called me into her office. My stomach dropped, old fears rushing back, but she smiled and said, "I just wanted to tell you something that night reminded me why kindness matters." It changed me. She paused, then added, "You changed me." I walked out of her office feeling taller somehow. That storm taught me something I'll never forget. Kindness doesn't care about job titles, salaries, or status. It's about being human in moments when it would be easier to stay distant. Sometimes, the smallest acts, like offering shelter or listening without judgment, can ripple outward in ways we never expect. A simple invitation can become a turning point. So if you ever find yourself hesitating to help because you think you are not enough or not in the right position, remember this story. Kindness doesn't require permission. It just requires courage. You never know whose life you might change, or how much it might change your own. And sometimes all it takes is opening your door during a storm.